Trump's former longtime executive assistant testified for half an hour. She was known as the gatekeeper and said that a company directory had numbers for both Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal. She also said the Trump organization was paying her legal bills. What did the prosecution gain from her testimony?
Well, they introduced a small fact, which is that the Stormy Daniels has her contact information in the Trump organization system. Now, one of the reasons why I suspect that fact was presented is because we're going to see the prosecutors attempt to establish that Trump and Stormy Daniels did, in fact, have a intimate sexual encounter, which Trump has denied, and the Trump's lawyers denied during the opening statement. So I think this is the first piece of evidence, and my guess is there will be more evidence along these lines, because my guess is the prosecutors want to be able to say to the jurors, but at the end of this, you don't have to just take Stormy Daniels' word. We've presented additional evidence because, Trump has been saying that she's lying and this and that. So that, to me, is the significance of this, because if the prosecutors can establish that Trump is, well, to the extent that prosecutors can establish that Trump is lying about anything, it is helpful to their case. And this is a big point. He's denied that he's had this encounter with her, but it appears that it did, in fact, happen.
Mm-hmm. And John, Michael Cohen's banker was also briefly on the stand today. It seems like the prosecution is starting to dig into the records. We're talking dollars and cents, who signed what, and specific dates on specific documents. How crucial is it that the prosecution nails this part so they don't have to worry about whether the jury buys the testimony of, say, Michael Cohen?
It's absolutely crucial. These are very high stakes. The witnesses we're hearing from now are people who, have, I think, a greater record of credibility than Michael Cohen, who is going to be sort of the star witness, and also the one that is easiest for the defense to undermine, because he has pleaded guilty in the past to lying. So when you see these figures come up, whether it's Rona Graff, the gatekeeper to Trump World, or the banker for Michael Cohen, they're testifying to what seem to be kind of small pedestrian things, like how banking transaction works or whose phone number's in the Trump system. All of that is the prosecution laying a predicate for their story, laying out the details for the jury of each little piece, and trying to build credibility in their case before they ultimately get to Cohen. And they're going to rely on Cohen as a witness, but they're also going to hope that and try to make an attempt that to have all of these other pieces stack up outside of what Cohen says and point to what Cohen says, so that what he says has greater credibility than Michael Cohen himself.
Hey, Ankush, let's talk about the order of all of this. The prosecution starts with the blockbuster witness, David Pecker. Now they're moving into the nitty-gritty. What kind of strategy goes into the sequence here?
Oh, I think it's largely chronological so far, as I can see it. Right? They're just trying to tell a story in a simple chronological fashion. The best way to tell a story often is chronologically. But I think that's what's happening here, and I expect at some point, perhaps even next week, they're going to need to start to move into, okay, now how are these records booked how are these payments booked internally within the Trump organization? That maybe next week or the following week, but at some point the trial needs to get there. I mean, that's really the meat and potatoes of the actual charges against Trump.
Mm-hmm. Eugene, Trump keeps complaining about the trial keeping him off the campaign trail, and Wednesday, Wednesday was his one day off from court this week, and he went golfing. Obviously, he doesn't want to be in court, but is it fair to say he doesn't seem to care that much about campaigning either?
It's very difficult to make the argument that he's prioritizing getting his message to voters who aren't already on board with him. He would use this time, if he was, to try to win over independent voters, swing voters, undecided voters, which, quite frankly, are still a larger percentage of the electorate than some people would communicate. Instead, he's prioritized one of his favorite pastimes, which, quite frankly, shouldn't be a huge surprise to anyone who was paying attention to his presidency. He often went to golf during moments when people thought he could do a better job of connecting with Americans who weren't really sure that they had as much confidence in his ability to lead the country.
My God. John, on the other hand, you've got President Biden. He's been very busy out on the campaign trail, and he's starting to talk about Trump's trial at least a bit. At one event last night, he said that he hasn't had a chance to watch the proceedings because he's been campaigning in all the states in the past. He's completely avoided talking about Trump's legal trouble. What does it say that that's starting to change?
I think what it says is that there are people around him who see Donald Trump's charges that he faces in 4 separate cases as Donald Trump's greatest vulnerability. And if the Biden campaign and Biden himself aren't talking about that, they are missing an opportunity to do political damage to Donald Trump, who, by the way, is making the, an allegation not supported by facts or not supported by any evidence that Biden is actually using the legal system against him, weaponizing the legal system against him for political gain. So Biden's taking that hit, but had not been really hitting Trump on, on these charges that he faces. And we saw in the earlier case, Biden played around with this a little bit and said, Donald Trump might need a loan, was having some financial problems. So, but I think what's going on here is Biden trying to go as far as he can to hit Trump on his biggest vulnerability without going so far as to support the argument that Trump is making that Biden is intentionally weaponizing the justice system against him.
Yeah. Eugene, the president sat for an incredibly revealing interview with Howard Stern this morning, and for the first time said he'd be happy, that's a quote, happy to debate Donald Trump. His campaign had refused to commit to a debate for a while now. So why say this now, do you think?
Well, I think he was getting quite a bit of criticism from those on the right that he was not able to talk about the policy issues that matter most to many voters, specifically those outside of, his base. And that gave Trump a leg up. And Trump was using that on the campaign trail, suggesting that the president was fearful of him. But I think as we get closer to the election, what Biden and his team realize is that he's going to have to adopt new strategies to communicate to voters why he is superior to the former president. And one of the ways you can do that is by being on a stage and going tit for tat when it comes to policy issues. And so we might see this actually happen sooner than later. Where they are right now in terms of plans and actually bringing it to fruition isn't clear yet. But there has been a real shift because we do know that this is not something or approach, should we say, that the president seemed very interested in taking before now.